We have already been designing the login page for our application for a couple of lectures now, and the way that we have been testing this is by having to run over and over our code on an Android or an iOS emulator. And running our code is necessary for us to test the functionality, but it shouldn't be necessary for us to test the design. For example, it shouldn't have been necessary to test whether or not the placeholder were shown correctly. There has to be a better way for us to know if the code that we are adding inside of a SAML page is being rendered the way that we think it should be rendered. And there is. So during this lecture, we're going to take a look at the Xamarin Forms Previewer, which is going to allow us to, like its name suggests, preview our Xamarin application. More specifically, it's going to allow us to take a look at the SAML code that we are defining in real time. So let's go ahead and open that Xamarin Forms Previewer. To open it, we have to navigate to the View menu, navigate to Other Windows, and select Xamarin Forms Previewer. It will probably open as an independent window. I usually want to drag it right by the side of the SAML page that I have open and make it a bit narrower so I can take a look at most of the SAML file, but widen up so I can see the two tabs that allow me to switch between iOS and Android previews. So as you can see, I can see the preview for Android and for iOS very quickly and in real time, so I can also compare how it looks in one platform and how it looks in another. Now it is important to notice that I do need a Mac connected to my Visual Studio, or rather Visual Studio connected to a Mac, to be able to see the iOS render, because remember that the render is happening on the Mac, it's just being displayed on my Windows computer through Visual Studio. And so now that we have the Xamarin Forms Previewer open, it's time for us to test it out. I mentioned that it will allow us to check out the changes that we make on a SAML page in real time, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. For example, let's say that I wanted to change the background color for the button. All I had to do is start typing background color and select it from this list and pick any one of the values that are listed in here or grab my own value. In this case, I could select one of the colors that are listed in here, for example, Dodger Blue, and see that the change is indeed applied immediately, and I can see it on both Android and on iOS. But notice that in this particular case, with this particular background color on iOS, it just doesn't look good, because the default color for the text on a button on iOS is a color that resembles a lot that Dodger Blue that we have just selected. So what we could do is either change the background color to another one or change the text color, which we can do through the text color property, and search for example, white. And in this case, on iOS, now we have that text color set to white, and on Android, it has remained the same because it was already white. But you can see in this case how the Xamarin Forms Previewer is allowing us to very easily see the changes that we make as we make them, without us having to run the application over and over again. Just imagine what we would have to do if we didn't have the Xamarin Forms Previewer available. We would have to run the application on Android and on iOS and identify if everything is working correctly. If it wasn't, like for example what we just saw with the background color for the button, we would have had to return to Visual Studio, make the changes, and run again. This is one of the ways the Xamarin Forms Previewer allows us to save some time when designing our application. And in fact, it probably has allowed you to identify one small issue that we have in here and that we have to solve. And that is that both on Android and iOS, we see that all of the elements expand all the way to the edges. And it doesn't look that good. We should probably add some margin to the sides. And in the next lecture, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to learn how to add some margin right from our SAML code.